A single cocktail napkin can be the difference between a massive tip and a bloodbath. When 24-year-old waitress Sienna slid a folded napkin across the table to Miami's most feared man, she wasn't circling her tip, she was circling the words, "Gunman at the bar, deal's a setup, move now." What happened next changed everything. Le Coeur Noir on Brickell Avenue was the kind of restaurant where Miami's power players came to carve into $90 dry-aged tomahawks and pretend the city belonged to them. It smelled of truffle oil, imported cigars drifting in from the terrace, and old money. For Sienna Cross, it was just a place to wear a black silk blouse, smile until her jaw ached, and chip away at the hospital debt her father's heart surgery had left behind. It was a humid Thursday night in October, the restaurant only half full, bathed in the low amber light of hanging brass fixtures. Sienna was working the back terrace section, the private tables usually reserved for politicians, ball players, and men who didn't want their faces near the street-side windows. Tonight, Table 9 belonged to Adrian Cole. Everyone in the service industry downtown knew the name Adrian Cole, even though the Miami Herald only ever called him a prominent import-export executive. At 33, Adrian ran the Cole syndicate with a stillness that unsettled people more than shouting ever could. He was a tall, sharp-jawed man in a slate-gray suit, a vintage Cartier on his wrist worth more than Sienna's car. He never barked orders at the staff. He was unfailingly polite, tipped 100%, and always in crisp, uncreased bills. But tonight, the air around his table was thick with something wrong. He was dining with Nico Falcone, a capo from the rival Falcone family. Nico was everything Adrian wasn't: sweaty, loud, glancing at his phone every 90 seconds. They were supposedly hammering out a truce over the port routes at Port Miami. But Sienna, whose younger brother Jake had once run errands for a small-time bookie, knew the language of the streets. Nico was overcompensating, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny, and he hadn't touched his $350 bottle of Barolo all night. At 9:40, the glass front doors swung open, and a man in a damp raincoat stepped inside, shaking water off his sleeves. Sienna was at the host stand, keying in a wine order when she clocked him. He skipped the hostess entirely and sat at the far end of the marble bar, ordering a soda water. He kept his gloves on and he wasn't watching the bartender. He was staring into the mirrored wall behind the liquor shelves, a mirror that gave a perfect, unobstructed view of Table 9, where Adrian sat with his back to the room. A cold prickle crawled up Sienna's spine. She watched Nico tap his water glass twice with one finger. In the mirror, the man in the raincoat slid his hand slowly inside his jacket. It was a setup. Nico had lured Adrian out of his fortified compound in Coral Gables and into supposedly neutral ground. The truce was a lie. If that man pulled a trigger, Adrian Cole would be dead before dessert arrived. But Sienna's mind jumped past Adrian to the crossfire. A room full of diners, waiters, bartenders, all of them caught in a kill box the second the first shot rang out. She couldn't just stand there, and despite everything she knew about who Adrian was, she remembered the night a drunk regular had grabbed her wrist too hard, and Adrian had quietly stood up, said 4 words to the man, and watched him leave without his coat. Adrian was dangerous, but he was dangerous with a code. Nico suddenly rose, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "Give me a second, Adrian. Need the restroom. Order us another bottle." It was the oldest move in the book. The moment Nico cleared the blast radius, the hit would go down. Sienna's heart slammed against her ribs. She had maybe 30 seconds. She rushed to the host stand, hands shaking so badly she fumbled the register twice, grabbed a black Sharpie and a spare napkin, and pressed the pen down hard enough to nearly tear the paper. "Gunman at bar. Setup. Move now." She circled it twice, folded it into a fresh drink menu, forced her breathing steady, and walked toward Table 9 with her best oblivious customer service smile. At the bar, the man in the raincoat had turned fully around now, soda water forgotten, sliding off his stool. Sienna reached the table. Adrian was checking his watch, face unreadable. "So sorry to interrupt, Mr. Cole," she said, voice remarkably level. "Your driver called the front desk. He asked me to hand you this right away." Adrian's dark eyes flicked up, a fraction of a frown. He knew his driver, Boone, never called the front desk. Boone had a direct line to his earpiece. Sienna didn't wait for the question. She set the folded menu on the table, leaned in an inch, and tapped it twice with one finger. The eye contact she held wasn't the polite deference of a waitress. It was a scream. Adrian didn't say a word. He opened the menu, eyes locking onto the black ink, the aggressive circle around gunman and setup and move. For one long second, the whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He didn't gasp, didn't glance over his shoulder, didn't give the shooter a single tell. He looked up at her instead, eyes turning to something like black glass. "Thank you, Sienna," he murmured, low and rough. Then, "Get down." Before her brain caught up with the words, the room exploded. Adrian's hand shot beneath his jacket while his other gripped the table edge, and with one brutal heave, he flipped the whole thing, plates shattering, the Barolo bursting across the floor in a dark red spray that looked sickeningly like blood. The muffled cough of a suppressed pistol cut through the chaos, punching into the booth, exactly where his chest had been a half-second earlier. Screams tore through the dining room. Diners dove under tables. Sienna dropped behind the host stand, arms over her head as glass rained down. From behind the overturned table, Adrian returned fire. 2 flat cracks, and a heavy thud told her the man from the bar had gone down. But it wasn't over. The front doors burst open, and 3 more men in dark coats flooded in, Nico's backup crew, opening up with automatic fire without a shred of concern for who else was in the room. A hand clamped around Sienna's wrist and hauled her to her feet. It was Adrian, dust and drywall in his hair, a thin cut bleeding along his jaw. "Move," he shouted, dragging her from the host stand a half-second before bullets shredded the wood where she'd been crouched. They sprinted for the kitchen, Adrian firing blind behind them, kicking the double doors open into a wall of steel counters and fluorescent light. Cooks hit the floor, hands over their heads. He shoved her down the line between the stoves, bullets punching through the doors behind them and pinging off hanging pans. Sienna's shoes slid on spilled oil. Adrian's arm caught her before she went down, hauling her the rest of the way to the glowing red exit sign. He kicked the fire door open, and they spilled out into a warm, wet Miami alley, rain just starting to fall. A black armored Escalade sat idling with its headlights dark, rear door already open, and beside it stood Boone, Adrian's driver, laying down cover fire toward the mouth of the alley. "Go, go, go!" Boone bellowed. Adrian threw Sienna into the back seat and dove in after her. Boone slammed the door and peeled out, tires screaming against wet asphalt as the Escalade fishtailed into Brickell traffic. Inside, the silence was suffocating, broken only by the engine and Sienna's ragged breathing. She stared at her hands, cut from broken glass she hadn't even felt. She was an ordinary girl, sitting in a getaway car with the head of the Miami underworld. Adrian sat beside her, calm, popping the spent magazine from his pistol and sliding in a fresh one with a sharp click. Then he turned to look at her and pulled the folded napkin from his pocket, the black ink smudged with rain. "Nico's a paranoid man," he said quietly. "He wouldn't move on a hunch. Someone confirmed my table, my timing, my exposure, someone on the inside." Sienna shook her head frantically. "It wasn't me, I swear. I just saw him tap his glass, and my brother used to run with guys like that, so I knew what it meant. I was only trying to help." "I know it wasn't you," Adrian said. "If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't have handed me this." He tapped the napkin. "But Nico saw you hand it to me. He saw me read it. He saw me flip that table. He knows you're the reason his hit failed." Her stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Nico Falcone just got humiliated by a 24-year-old waitress. He lost 3 men and has shot at my territory tonight. He won't forget your face." "I need to go home," she stammered. "My cat." "If you go home tonight, you won't see sunrise," Adrian said flatly. They'll burn the building down just to make a point. He looked out at the rain-streaked window. Boone, take us to the house. No, Sienna said, pushing back against the door. You can't just take me. I saved your life. For the first time, something in Adrian's expression cracked. Fierce and unexpectedly protective. You did save my life, Sienna Cross, he said softly. And in my world, a life debt is the only currency that matters. You're not a prisoner. You're my responsibility now, and as long as you're with me, no one from the Falcone family will touch you. The Escalade sped on through the rain, carrying Sienna away from the only life she'd known. The gates of the Coral Gables compound parted like the entrance to a fortress. Sienna later learned, from an unsealed affidavit filed by an FBI agent who'd spent a decade chasing the Cole organization, that the estate ran military-grade surveillance, reinforced panic rooms, and a private security team of ex-contractors. It was a gilded cage, and now it was her home. For 3 days she drifted through it, in a kind of suspended disbelief. A suite overlooking Biscayne Bay, a closet mysteriously stocked in her exact size, meals from a private chef left outside her door. The luxury felt airless. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the crack of gunfire and saw red wine spraying across white linen. Adrian gave her space, though his presence filled the house anyway. She'd catch him from her balcony at dawn, smoking by the seawall, talking low with Boone, moving like something that ran the city from its shadows. On the 4th night, her door opened. Adrian stepped in wearing a fitted charcoal sweater instead of a suit, carrying a small medical kit and a thick folder. "Sit," he said, nodding to the chair by the window. She obeyed. He knelt and took her hand, inspecting the shallow cuts from the broken glass she hadn't let the house doctor near. "You've been picking at them," he said, dabbing antiseptic on gently. "I can do it myself." "I know you can. You don't have to." His voice dropped. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, Sienna. Let someone take care of you for once." The intimacy of it, set against the violence she'd watched him commit hours earlier, made her breath catch. When he finished bandaging her hand, his tone shifted back to something colder. "I have answers about the setup." He passed her the folder. Inside were grainy surveillance photos, bank transfers, a wiretap transcript. "Nico doesn't move without a confirmed source," Adrian said, pouring 2 fingers of scotch. "Someone gave him my table, my security rotation, the exact window my guard would be down." The first photo showed a dive bar booth, Nico Falcone on one side. On the other, shoulders hunched, a younger man passing over a padded envelope. Sienna's lungs emptied in one violent rush. "No, that's not. He's out of that life. He promised me." "Your brother Jake," Adrian said, flat. "He owed the Falcones 60 grand. Nico offered to wipe it in exchange for my reservation, my table, my blind spot." Tears came fast and hot. She'd worked doubles, ruined her feet, buried herself in her father's medical bills, while Jake gambled his way into selling her out, without even knowing it was her section that night. "He didn't know I'd be working it," she managed. "He couldn't have known I'd be caught in it." "Ignorance isn't an alibi where I come from," Adrian said. "He handed me to my enemies. The penalty is death." Sienna was on her feet before she knew it, fists in the front of his sweater. "You promised me protection. You told me a life debt meant something." His hands settled on her hips, anchoring her there. "You are protected. Jake isn't. He's my blood. If you kill him, you take the only family I have left. Spare him. For me." For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her, jaw tight, weighing decades of hard rules against the woman standing in front of him. Then something in him gave. "Nico has him," he said finally. "We intercepted chatter an hour ago. He figured out it was your brother who sold the intel, and that you're the one who blew the hit. He grabbed Jake from his apartment. He's bait to draw me out." Her blood went cold. "Where?" "An old shipping yard off the Miami River." Adrian turned for the door. "I'm leaving now. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. He's my brother." "Adrian, Nico wants to punish him because of what I did. If I don't go, I'll never forgive myself." And I won't forgive you either. He studied her for a long moment, then gave one stiff nod. Get your coat. Rain was falling in sheets by the time the convoy pulled into the rusted skeleton of the shipping yard, lightning flashing off stacked containers and dead rail cars. Adrian's men fanned into the dark with suppressed rifles. He kept Sienna close behind him, his body a wall between her and the open ground. Cole? Nico's voice rang off the metal. He stood under a portable work light, 6 armed men flanking him. Jake kneeling in the mud beside him, face bruised. Jake, Sienna lunged, but Adrian's arm caught her like a bar across the chest. You actually brought the girl, Nico sneered. Didn't peg you as sentimental, Cole. Turns out your weak spot wears an apron. Let him go, Nico, Adrian said, voice carrying flat over the rain. This is between us. The Cross family is under my crest now. Nico laughed and pressed a revolver to the back of Jake's head. This rat sold you out for pennies and cost me my crew. I'm going to open his skull, and then I'm going to take my time with her while you watch. Nico, Adrian said softly. Look up. A red dot bloomed on Nico's forehead. Then another, on the man beside him. Then more, scattered across the group. Boone and the sniper team had circled them from the container stacks in the dark. You're surrounded by ghosts, Adrian said. Drop the gun. Nico's face twisted with the understanding that he was already dead. In desperation, he swung the revolver off Jake and toward Sienna instead. Adrian! She screamed. Adrian moved faster than thought, throwing himself in front of her as the gun went off. The bullet caught him in the shoulder. In the same instant, the yard erupted. Boone's rifle cracked from above, and Nico's men dropped before they could raise a weapon. Nico himself stumbled back, his own shoulder shattered by sniper fire, revolver falling into the mud. Adrian didn't go down. Bleeding through his sweater, he pushed Sienna behind a rusted steel beam and walked toward Nico through the rain, pistol raised. Wait, we can make a deal, Nico begged, crawling backward. I'll give you the docks, all of it. You touched what's mine, Adrian said, and fired twice. Silence fell except for the rain. Jake knelt shaking in the mud. Sienna ran and threw her arms around him, then let go. Adrian walked over, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. You sold my life for $60,000, Jake, he said coldly. Every law I live by says I leave you here. A pause. But your sister bought your life with her nerve tonight. He tossed a banded stack of cash into the mud at Jake's knees. Get on a bus. Leave Florida. If my people see your face in this city again, I won't ask twice. Jake nodded, scrambling for the money, unable to meet his sister's eyes. She turned from him without another word and walked to Adrian instead, pressing her palm against his bleeding shoulder. You took a bullet for me. His eyes softened, the ice finally gone. He wiped rain and mud from her cheek with his thumb. I told you, he murmured, pulling her against his chest, in the wreckage of his enemies. You belong to me now, and a king protects his queen. He kissed her there in the rain, and she kissed him back like it was the only thing left standing. The waitress from Le Coeur Noir was gone. In her place stood a woman bound to the head of the Miami underworld by debt, danger, and something that felt, terrifyingly, like love. Did Sienna make the right call, staying with a man like Adrian Cole? Or is she just dancing with the devil in a very beautiful cage? Let us know what you think in the comments. If this one had you on the edge of your seat, hit like, share it, and subscribe for more pulse-pounding crime romance. See you in the next one.